So today is Thursday. It is Chai Shvat, Tafshin Ayin Vov, and we are in the Mamar Vayihiyu Chayei Sara, Tafshin Yud Gimel, in Teres Menachem Sefer Mamarim, Tafshin Yud Gimel, and we are on page Mem Gimel. We are up to
top line.
I think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines from the top. The line starts protein. We're at the full stop.
Oh, okay.
Before we go on, we were in the middle of focusing on Tanya, if you remember. I'm sorry?
That's what we're on the top line. Acharka.
Second line?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. I think I only have 4 copies. So,
you have to do that.
if you don't mind sharing.
They will now be partners.
We're just going to go through this section of chapter 51, and it'll give us clarity, more clarity at least, into what the Rebbe is trying to say here. Again, the question is the fragmentation of the faculties of the soul. Where do they begin? Is it that the energy of the soul is pure, unfragmented? In other words, it would be the same energy in the hand as in the foot, as in the head, and it is the particular organ of the body that shapes, that gives that energy its functionality, its specific functionality? Or does that fragmentation already begin, that Shiur, as it were, that form? Does it already begin where? In the Koyach HaNefesh, in the actual energy of the soul before it descends into the body? That's the question.
The first one would be like electricity as in the inherent state.
Yeah, so let's focus on let's see what the Alter Rebbe says and how the Alter Rebbe learns it, and the Rebbe's explanation why the Alter Rebbe says what he does. The Alter Rebbe here is discussing man, and from man to understand how it works in terms of godliness. However, the key to understanding the subject is to be found in the text, and from my flesh I see God. The Alter Rebbe understands these words literally. From what we see within ourselves, in our own soul and body, we can visualize the parallel on the spiritual level in the divine emanations and the world in general. By way of analogy, the human soul pervades all 248 organs of the body, from head, the highest part of the body, to foot, the lowest part of the body. The soul pervades the body to the extent that no organ or portion of it remains void of the soul. Nevertheless, the soul's principal abode is revealed, in a revealed form, as opposed to the soul as it is in its essence, and dwelling place, in an all-encompassing, non-revealed form, is in one's brain. And from the brain, the soul is diffused throughout all the organs. This takes place in all the organs simultaneously, for as the Rebbe explains, this diffusion of the soul refers to the life force from which the organs derive their vitality, in which respect all organs are equal, meaning to say the chayes hayevorim, as opposed to the koiches, the fact that they're alive rather than the fact that they function in a particular way. That happens in one spontaneous, equal moment for the entire body, because in terms of life, of living, all the organs are equal. This is one aspect of the soul's emanation, from the brain to the organs. And in Hasidic terminology, it can be termed light, a revelation which is equal throughout. A second aspect of the emanation, that the organs derive from the soul, which is in the brain, is the following. And that's what the Rebbe is discussing in our Mamar. Moreover, each organ receives from the soul, a different form of life force and functional power appropriate to it according to the organ's composition and character. That's what we're discussing in the Mamar, the Hischalkus aspect. In other words, the difference between the functional ability of one's organ and that of another does not derive from the organ itself, like water in a colored glass, for example, which takes on the color of the containing vessel. Rather, does each organ draw from the soul its ability to see or hear, and so on, as the Alter Rebbe continues. The eye receives from the soul a life force, an ability to see. The power of sight accords with the smooth and translucent nature of the tissue of the eye. But where does that start from? Not from the eye or from the tissue of the eye. It receives a life force from a koyach, a power from the soul, which is tailored to eyesight. The ear receives from the soul a life force, an ability to hear, the mouth to speak, and the feet to walk. Each organ in the body, in accordance with its composition and character, receives its life force and ability from the soul, which dwells and becomes revealed initially in the brain.
Is this coming from Adam Kadmon?
One second. Let's first go through the text, then we can focus in on details. Because it's a bit of a long inyan. So let's try to get through it, and then we can go back and try to refocus. As we clearly sense how in the brain one is conscious of all that occurs within the 248 organs and of everything experienced by them. Why? Because the brain is the nerve center and principal abode and source of the life force of the entire body. Here we go. The Rebbe here adds a commentary which clarifies the subject. By way of introduction, the life force from the soul which animates the body comprises two aspects. One is the life-giving force, the fact that the body is alive and each organ is alive. In that, the whole body is alive and draws its vitality from the soul. In this aspect, there is no difference between one organ and the next. The head, for example, is no more alive than the foot, just as the foot is no less alive than the head. The entire body with all its organs is equally alive throughout. In Hasidic terminology, this aspect of the life-giving force is called the light of the soul. For light shines equally upon everything around the light source, regardless of the quality or nature of the subject receiving the light. The second aspect of the soul's life force is the specific functional power which each organ draws from the soul. This power is unique to each organ. The eye receives from the soul the power to see, the ear to hear, the mouth to speak, and the foot to walk. The manner in which the organ receives the latter life force and functional power can be explained in two ways. One is that the life force emanating from the soul to the organ is utterly plain and uncompounded, possessing none of the diverse qualities and powers of the various organs. According to this explanation, the various functional powers of the organs would be differentiated with respect to the life force emanating to them from the soul only after the life force actually becomes enclosed within the organs. For example, only after the life force becomes enclosed within the eye would it become the power of sight, and only after it becomes enclosed within the ear would it become the power of hearing. An analogy to this explanation would be water in a colored glass. Although it remains colorless, yet since it is seen through the walls of a white or red vessel, for example, it seems white or red to the viewer. Likewise, each organ receives a plain, uncompounded life force from the soul, and it is the organ that gives the life force enclosed within it its specific functional ability. The eye enables the life force to give the power to see, and the ear enables it to give the power to hear. Harris's analogy, electricity. This would be similar to that. The second possible explanation, and that accepted by Tanya, is that the soul, despite its pristine, uncompounded essence, includes in potential form all the powers of the various organs, and it is these faculties which each individual organ receives. The eye receives from the life force of the soul the power to see, and the ear receives from it the power to hear. These powers were originally included in potentia within the soul, and each becomes revealed as the life force becomes enclosed within the respective organ. Thus, the power to see or hear does not originate only when the life force becomes enclosed within the eye or the ear. It already exists in potentia within the comprehensive life force emanating from the soul, although it is not yet revealed. Tanya proceeds to explain that this is the correct explanation. The commentary of the Rebbe explains why we must accept this second explanation. If we were to say that the various functional powers are not differentiated in potentia, within the life force until after it becomes enclosed within the organs, like water or light, which does not itself possess a color, but acquires it when viewed through colored glass, then the brain would be conscious of the same sensation from what is experienced in the eye as from what is experienced in the air. Because these, it's in italics now because that's the Rebbe's words, translation of the Rebbe's words, because these sensations have already left their respective organs. In the analogy of the water thus too, water removed from a white vessel is no different from water removed from a red vessel once removed from the vessel. It loses, once removed from the vessel, it loses the vessel's color. Likewise, messages conveying sensations from the eye would be no different from those coming from the air, since they have already left their respective organs. One might argue, according to this explanation, which Tanya does not accept, that when a particular organ calls into being a functional power in the life force drawn into it from the soul, this differentiation becomes acquired in the life force, like an ingot of silver, which once it has been molded into the shape of a vessel, remains in that shape later too. Right? So maybe we can say that that's the situation. According to this argument, the difference affected by each organ in the life force drawn into it from the soul remains also in the sensation transmitted from the organ back to the brain, even after it leaves the organ. This would account for the different messages received by the brain for the varying sensations and occurrences experienced by the eye and ear, for example. So maybe we could say that no, the Koyach HaNefesh is pure and uncompounded. But once it goes into the organ, as it were, the organ impresses its character onto the Koyach HaNefesh, and it remains. And therefore the messages that are transmitted back to the brain are also different. So what's the proof? If, however, we say that the soul which is based in the brain utterly transcends any kind of differentiation, even a differentiation in potentia, in which the various powers of the organs are included within the soul, then the soul within the brain would not distinguish between the sensation of what happens in the eye and the sensation of what happens in the ear or other organs. Why? Because the soul itself, according to this explanation, is utterly plain and uncompounded. Even therefore, if the messages coming from the various organs to the brain are indeed different from one another, yet this difference would not be distinguished by the soul in the brain, which utterly transcends all differences between organic functions. We must therefore say that a difference exists between the various functional powers later revealed in the organs, even before the life force is actually drawn from the soul to the organs. Right? So in other words, like this. Okay, you want to say that the Koyach HaNefesh is utterly plain and uncompounded, and the organ impresses upon it its character to such an extent that that character remains even after it leaves the organ, when it transmits back. But if the Koyach HaNefesh, the power of this faculty, as it is in the brain, is utterly pure and uncompounded, the brain has no way of identifying the message, because it doesn't exist within the brain, even in potentia. Right? If, on the other hand, it exists in the brain in potentia, then it has some identifying features that when a message is transmitted back to it from this koyach, from this faculty, from this power, the brain is able to identify it. So the bottom line is that according to the Tanya, and according to the way the Rebbe explains it, the koyches hanefesh, the faculties of the soul, of the soul, even before they enter into the organs, has some association to the particular organ that it will ultimately animate. And that's the point that the Rebbe makes over here, that there's the Adam Pnimi, and there are two aspects in the Adam Pnimi. There's the interior man and the exterior man, and in each one there are two aspects. So in the interior man, you have the koyches hanefesh as they are in potentia, the faculties of the soul as they are in their potential form, where they are not yet revealed and in their full force as they are in the organ, but they still possess a similarity to the organ, to the aver, to the limb in which they're going to ultimately enclose themselves and ultimately animate. And then you have the koyach hanefesh as it is beginning. That's the Adam Pnimi and Adam Chitzeni. That's Pnimi and Chitzeni and Adam Pnimi. And then you have a similar differentiation in Adam Chitzeni. But we'll hopefully, after gone through the Tanya, tomorrow we'll be able to
when it enters into
learn it inside.
when it enters into an organ,